Earlier in the week, I had a chance to catch up with Carl Deffenbaugh, one of the outstanding sports anchors at WDBJ 7. Carl and I previewed the high school football season as high school football gets underway 2 weeks from today. We also talk about the Penn State situation. Carl's a big Denver Broncos fan, so we talk about Peyton Manning and more. Carl Deffenbaugh, WDBJ 7, on the Sports Buffet Podcast. Always fun to get new faces on the Sports Buffet Podcast, and faces that we hope will become regular faces. And Carl Deffenbaugh is one of those guys that we hope will get on with us quite frequently. He's at WDBJ 7 with Travis Wells and Karen Loftus. And Carl, we had you on once before back during the Spring Sports State Championships, but we didn't get a chance to really get to know you a little bit. For people who are not familiar with your background and everything, tell us how you got to our little piece of heaven down here in Central and Southwest Virginia.
Well, it was just meant to be, I guess. I'm from Maryland originally, from outside of Baltimore. I went to school outside of Chicago, sort of been bouncing around a bit. I was actually working at a station up in Pennsylvania before this, but my longtime girlfriend goes to law school at Washington and Lee, so I already knew a little bit about the area and then was getting ready to look for a job and just got really lucky. The position opened up at WDBJ, and it's been great. I've loved it down here.
And one thing that impresses me of reading your bio, well, a couple things, but one is you're an East Coast guy, but a couple of your favorite teams are based in Colorado. How did that happen?
Yes, I figured that might stick out to you. My dad went to University of Colorado, so even though I've never actually lived there, we would go vacation there, and when I was a kid, he raised me rooting for the Rockies, so I picked up the Broncos along the way, and it's been a little rough for the Rockies at least, but I'm sticking with them. I'm not going anywhere.
Now, people, I actually have a Colorado Rockies pullover and a Terrell Davis jersey, and people are like, "Are you a Denver fan?"
Nice. I knew I was coming on for a good man.
Well, people like, "Are you a Denver fan?" I'm like, "No, it was just on sale, and I like to wear as many different things as possible." So definitely, we'll touch on a few of those things in a moment. Another thing that stuck out to me and impressed me, I think, anytime you get to a market like the Lynchburg-Roanoke market, one thing that's got to come across is your passion for local sports. Correct me if I'm wrong, you have won an award for a high school sports show up in the Pennsylvania, Maryland area, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we got nominated. We ended up not coming out on top, unfortunately, but our high school football show up there was nominated for a regional Emmy, and we were actually up against a bunch of different shows about the Philadelphia Eagles and some of the other big city markets up there. So we were pretty proud of it. We put a lot of work into it, and I've tried to definitely bring that to Friday Football Extra as well. We love getting around to the different schools, the different stories with all the players and coaches around here.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, you came like either right as the season started last year, or it was like week 1 or 2.
I think I missed the first 2 weeks of the high school season, the very first week of college. I was here, my very first game actually was Radford at George Witt. The first week I started, we went down there, checked out the scene in Whitsville, and then the very next day I was off to Tech at East Carolina. So I was a little bit late, but we jumped right in when I got here.
What impresses you about high school football in this area?
Honestly, just the level of talent and the depth of talent. I was up in sort of central Pennsylvania, outside of Harrisburg and Lancaster, and there's some good kids. They go Division II, Division III for sure, and every now and again you get a D1 player. But just last year when we were starting to roll in all these commitments, all these local kids going to either Tech or UVA, other ACC schools, just the level of talent, we certainly see it every Friday night.
Let's talk a little bit about some high school football. I think you kind of made the swing around my area up here in Lynchburg a few days ago with the quartet. Talk about what you saw up here with the few of the Seminole District teams.
Yeah, apparently the Seminole District is going to be stacked this year. I know it's always pretty tough, but one of the players at Heritage actually compared to the SEC, so we got something to live up to there. I'll start there at Heritage, sort of going through the notebook a little bit. Obviously, Bradley taking over there. He's got 2 state titles from William Campbell, and what I was really impressed by, they're putting in his spread attack, sort of stretching the wide receivers out and trying to go no huddle. The practice I was at was moving really quickly. The calls were coming in from the sideline, adjustments right before the snap, and it seems like it should have the defenses on their heels a little bit.
I'll let you continue on with the Lynchburg trek of what else you saw.
We also went over to Brooksville. Obviously, they were coming down off the state championship. Pretty pumped about that still, and sort of use that to motivate themselves going into the season. Jeff Woody's got a great club up there, and Kendall B. Kraft has to be the sort of headliner. I believe this is going to be a 4-year starter now at quarterback running the show. Obviously, on the defensive side, they lose Corin Kervin, who's now doing his thing down at Bama with the national champs, but back to the offense, it sounds like the attack's going to be a little bit more running back focused this year. Last year they would really spread it out. They had a lot of speed at wide receiver. This year the talent's more at the tailback position, so they're going to focus on that. And the other Seminole school I got to was EC Glass as well, with Ben Martin up there coming over from Appomattox. 4-6 last year, so trying to bounce back, be a little competitive. And he's bringing also a new offense, kind of like they have at Heritage. This one's going to be a triple option, though. Something that he worked with a lot with Scott Abel, who's now actually coaching Washington Lee, that guy there. So should be a different attack that people can see from EC Glass.
And you know, one thing that impresses me, and I think a lot of people, when they hear spread, don't really think about this, but especially with Heritage and Brad Bradley's offense, is just because they spread it doesn't mean they're going to throw it every down. You know, I think the spread can be effective just as much in terms of opening up the run. What do you think on my comment there?
Absolutely, and honestly, of the plays that I saw, probably, I would say more than 60% and getting up to 75 were still run plays out of that spread, but by getting those wideouts out, you bring the defenders, you stretch them away from the line of scrimmage, and if you have the matchups, you can win those matchups at the line. All of a sudden, you've got wide open daylight for the backs and the quarterback as well. Javante Parrish up there at Heritage is a returning starter, and he's going to be running sort of a dual-threat pass-run quarterback up there. Should be pretty deadly.
What are some other things that you've seen just in some of the packages you guys have done, and just maybe in some of the other chatter or whatever you hear in terms of your impressions of the season?
Of the high school teams, I can sort of go through some of the other ones that I've been to. Got down I-81 South a little bit to Whitville, to those George Wythe Maroons. They've won 5 straight district championships down there, but have a lot to replace from last year. They were 12-1, actually lost to the eventual state champs. Get this, though, 3 running backs last year, 3 different backs, all over 1,000 yards they have to replace this year. So that's a lot of work for H.S. Ingo and his crew, but they do have a returning quarterback in Alex Willis, so they should still be pretty good. Running through some other guys, Franklin County, actually, news came out today, I don't know if you saw that, the move to the River Ridge District is still on for next season. So it doesn't affect them this year, but they will be joining sort of a mega district next year with 9 different teams. But as for this year, they have 3 straight 9-3 seasons, and a big year for them, just depth of talent-wise. They brought in more than 100 kids to their first practice over the 3 teams between 9th grade, JV, and varsity. So they're starting to draw those AAA numbers down there. And finally, actually, just this morning, I was over at Cave Spring, right close to our home in Roanoke with Tim Fulton. They've got to replace maybe the top performer from last year around our area. Sam Wright rushed for over 2,700 yards. And probably the line of practice was, I was talking to one of their offensive linemen, and he just very nonchalantly with a laugh at the end said, yeah, we might be doing a little more pass blocking this year, pass protecting than run blocking. They've got a quarterback back in Connor Baker, going to try to spread stuff out a little bit more now that they don't have that workhorse.
Well, I put a lot of faith in Tim Fulton, good guy down there for the Knights. Let's kind of hit on some other subjects real quick. The Virginia Tech Hokies, obviously, you guys take a little bit of an interest in them as well. It appears, you talk about losing a running back. They really have questions at the running back, and it seems like Logan Thomas might actually really have to step up and take a lion's share of the offense this year, whether it's with his feet or with his arm.
And obviously some questions on the offensive line as well, although we had Travis Wells out there at their first practice yesterday on Tuesday. He said the offensive line looked pretty good. We'll see how they do throughout camp. I hope people realize just how special it was to watch David Wilson last year. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. He set the school's all-time rushing record with over 1,700 yards, and he also had 10 100-yard games. But I was reading something actually from Giants training camp. Kevin Gilbride, the offensive coordinator for the New York Giants, who obviously drafted Wilson in the first round, said he might be the most explosive or dynamic player he's ever seen. So this is an ACC, college level even. This is a pro guy saying that Wilson's athleticism was that extremely off the charts. It's just incredible.
Yeah, and this is not Kevin Gilbride's first year either. I mean, he's been around.
He's been around a little bit.
He's been around for a little while. Let's talk about a couple other subjects that probably hit a little close to your heart. With the Denver Broncos, I mean, obviously I don't think you can argue bringing in a guy like Peyton Manning, but how difficult as a Broncos fan is it to say goodbye to Tim Tebow?
So this is my thing on Tebow. Obviously he draws a lot of people on both sides that either love him or hate him. I had no problem with the guy. He works his butt off. He practices hard. Sure, he wasn't the most talented quarterback passer, but he did incredible things last year. I don't know if I'll ever have a season to watch like that as a fan, just how many times it would get down to 2 minutes, and I would just be done, about to turn the TV off, but you couldn't because it was Tebow, and he was going to bring him back. And I'm obviously thrilled that Peyton is going to be there. I still can't believe it when I see the pictures, and there's a 18 in blue and orange running around out there. I did kind of hope that they would keep Tebow as a backup just for this reason, that Manning obviously is coming off these 4 neck surgeries. There's still some questions if he's healthy. And I think the thought in the Broncos camp was you want your backup to be able to run the same offense as Peyton, sort of keep it fluid if something does unfortunately happen. But what I was thinking, do you remember when Michael Vick took over for the Eagles when Kevin Cobb got injured?
Yeah.
It would have been a couple years ago now. Yeah. Because the teams had not been preparing for that type of dual-threat run quarterback, it threw him off, and Vic was phenomenal that year. And obviously teams started to adjust to him, but that's why I was kind of hoping they would keep Tebow. If, God forbid, something happens to Manning, it would just be such a change-up for defenses. But I wish him the best of luck. I know he's stirring up more drama running around shirtless out there in New York in the rain, but hope he does well for himself.
Well, here's the thing, too. I mean, obviously with John Elway being in charge of the team, if there is a question at the end of, John, did you pick the right guy? I don't think the Broncos fans, revolt against the great John Elway or anything, and I'm not saying that sarcastically.
Right.
But at the same time, if Peyton Manning cannot bring at least one Super Bowl to Denver, is it a failure, I guess, is my question.
A failure, I think they would certainly say that, because that's the standard that Elway has, obviously, and Manning has as well.
Right.
I don't think it would necessarily be a failure. And just the culture of the team, from everything that I've read and seen and watched out there, it seems to have just gone through such a drastic change. They were actually big players in the free agent market just because players wanted to latch on to Manning's train now and hopefully chase a title with him. And I was just really happy for the wide receivers, a guy like Eric Decker, Demaryius Thomas that played in the ACC, that were good talents and now are apparently just on point, clicking with Manning, working extra sessions with him, and just sort of picking his brain about what it takes to run an NFL offense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not ancient or anything, but I think I probably got a few years on you with me being 33. But, with me being 33, but, when Joe Montana went from the Niners to the Chiefs, I think Joe was a little bit at the end. I still have a little more faith in Peyton that Peyton can do some things. I really do.
I did too, because his last year playing, he was still in his old self, still phenomenal numbers. It was just sort of a rare neck injury. It's not like he's been slowly regressing over these years. He's still a top-level talent. It's just whether he can handle a couple hits once they start coming.
What do you make of the Penn State situation with their football program?
Well, first of all, one of the most tragic things, and probably a story unlike we've ever seen in college sports, really. And I know a lot of people have said this, but you got to first think about the victims and everything that they go through. And that's the worst part about the story, is just thinking, could any of those kids have been saved if these people, these leaders, had spoken up ahead of time or had dealt with it how they should have, as opposed to sort of sweeping things under the rug?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that is a very good point. I said, I think on my Twitter account at some point, once the decision had been handed out, I would have almost rather had the death penalty, because I think that you can recover a little bit quicker from that than, I think losing 10 scholarships a year for the next 4 years. I mean, the bowl games and the conference championships, that's a money issue. But, I mean, when you lose, 40 players essentially in 4 years that you could bring in, that's a lot.
Because you're thinking, even if you can convince the players that you want, your sort of top tier 4 and 5 star recruits, just that depth of talent in practice, they're not going to be going against the same caliber of people, and any injuries, you're left completely wide open. I mean, I've seen some of the projections. It's basically 2019, 2020 until they'll get back to full scholarship numbers. It could be pretty rough for a few years up there in Happy Valley. Have you ever been up there for a game?
I have not.
I got to go to one when I was still in college out at Northwestern. We went to the Wildcats at Penn State. The atmosphere is incredible. It's bigger than Lane Stadium, obviously, by about 40,000 people, and something about the way the stands are built, it just goes straight up, so you get these walls of sound going back and forth. I think this season the fans will certainly rally around them, and it'll be interesting to see what sort of the level of commitment throughout the years is. What do you think of the statue decision, taking down the Paterno statue?
I mean, I think it was... I think people that still have allegiances to Joe Paterno are somewhat misguided in terms of the fact of they remember him as a great football coach and not remember him for what he didn't do, type of thing. But, I mean, I wasn't going to, I mean, around here we do have a few Penn State alums that I know very well, and they're heartbroken by that. But I mean, I guess since if CVCC, Central Virginia Community College, where I went, had a statue of a great coach and took it down, I might get upset. But I guess I could come on both sides. But again, you talked about earlier about people thinking of the victims, and frankly, I don't think people are doing that enough, honestly, because this always gets back to a football discussion. It always gets back to a football discussion, not of how could we have helped.
Absolutely, and especially with the NCAA stuff. The only thing that I had sort of thought of, and I didn't really hear anyone else talking about this, that statue, I think, had to come down because it's a celebration. He's got his finger pointing up in the air. Just too much of what you don't want to do. I was wondering if they could have put up a new statue, maybe, of Paterno perhaps just standing there with his head bowed a little bit. Because of the quotes from him after this all came out, he admitted, he said he wished he had done more. And that as a way to sort of recognize the victims and say, this is part of our legacy and we are trying to avoid this. This will never happen again at Penn State, as opposed to just sort of wiping everything clean.
Well, I think either way you go on that, somebody's going to be unhappy and somebody's going to be, pleased. But Carl, I'm definitely pleased that we got you on the podcast. Hopefully you won't be a stranger and come back. And now, if we can get Karen Loftus, we will have hit the Channel 7 trifecta at some point.
Sounds good. Go around the horn with the WDBJ 7 Sports crew. I like it.
Carl, I appreciate it. Take care, man.
You too.